Evening, everybody. My name is Professor Deborah Corrigan, and I am a senior female leader in the Faculty of Education here. So it is my pleasure to welcome you all here this evening, both face-to-face and the very extensive group that we've got online as well, to the faculty's senior alumni seminar to celebrate International Women's Day. And one of my roles is actually the Director of Education Futures. And I think it's highly appropriate that I'm welcoming you here tonight because International Women's Day is not until tomorrow. So we've jumped the gun and we're futuristic in our very thinking. So I'd like to welcome you all. I'd also show my age and put my glasses on and pay my respects to the people of the Kulin Nations on whose traditional estates we meet today, to their ancestors and to the children who we are educating into the future. I also acknowledge other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present. And so I think International Women's Day is an incredibly important event to celebrate, and I had occasion to, not that I often read it, but I did have occasion to be sitting in a doctor's surgery reading the Women's Weekly. And I noticed that Julie Bishop actually did the foreword in the Women's Weekly this month in celebration of International Women's Day. And I think she has quite a lot to say about women's role in leadership. And I thought it was very interesting that one of her pertinent comments was, her colleagues would say to her, "Why do we have an International Women's Day? Why don't we have an International Men's Day?" To which she responded, "That's the other 364 days of the year." And I thought, well, probably very pertinent from her perspective at this point in time. But I think it is actually important that we, as women and also the men who I would love to welcome here this evening, celebrate the achievements of women in leadership. It is a really tough gig. I've been at Monash 33 years, and all but 8 of those years have been in a leadership position. It's a tough gig. It's really difficult to keep the momentum going, and but I think it's all really rewarding and well worth it in the long run because, you know what, we make a significant difference, and I think that's really important to remember. But my job here is really just to welcome you, so I am now going to pass over to the real organiser of this evening's events, and that's Associate Professor Jane Wilkinson, a colleague of mine, who has worked in the leadership area for quite some time and is passionate about leadership, is passionate about women and their role, and has a fantastic personal story as well in terms of her positive female role models. And I think as I talk to people around here, everybody I know who's a really good female leader has some fantastic role models, most of which are women, but sometimes are men also. And I think that's really important to remember. So Jane, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Deb. Thanks very much for that introduction, Deb, and your kindness. And I'd also like to thank the Faculty of Education for supporting this important event. I'd particularly like to say thank you to Megan Lowe, who is our marketing person who came up with this idea, has spearheaded it and done a brilliant job in getting us all organised and here today. Thank you as an audience. It's wonderful to see you, both face-to-face and our online people. And of course, a great vote of thanks to our panel of illustrious women leaders who've so kindly given up their time to come tonight. So, and I must say thanks to Luke, who's doing the recording. The organisation for tonight is that I'm going to speak for just a couple of minutes around International Women's Day, why we celebrate this event. And then I'm going to ask the panel to come up and they're going to introduce themselves. We'll facilitate some discussion with the panel. We've got some questions to ask them, but it'll be open-ended and hopefully a really good dialogue. I said to Deb beforehand that it's a bit like if you ever watch Barry Humphries, The Insiders, on 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. I'm starting to feel a bit like Barry Humphries, whom I think is fantastic. So, you know, hopefully I do an okay job. We are going to have time for questions and answers. about 15 to 20 minutes. So I'm really asking the audience, have a think about some questions you'd like to ask. And I'm going to be a feminist and say upright that I want the women to be the first ones to put their hands up and ask the questions. Okay, so International Women's Day occurs tomorrow. As educators, I'd like us to take a moment to reflect on why this day matters. Well, I'd like to tell you a story about my friend Anne Jones. In the late 1960s, Anne Jones entered the Victorian public education system. She was a freshly minted, first year out English secondary teacher. She loved to teach and she was eager to share her knowledge with the young people in her care. The first year male teacher in the classroom next to her had a similar spirit and they had many animated conversations. However, there were major differences between them. Anne was not paid the same salary as her male colleague. In fact, her salary was about 65% of what her colleague was being paid. Why? Because she was a woman. And being a woman meant that you didn't need the same salaries as men because you weren't going to be the main breadwinners in the family. You were going to marry and you would have a husband to support you. A year later, Anne married. And like all women in her day who were married, she was forced to resign from the teaching service and she became a temporary teacher with none of the benefits of permanency. Why? Because she was a married woman and married women don't need permanent jobs as they have babies and stay at home to look after them. It wasn't that long ago. And I just want to read out a little quote here from the Teachers Federation of Victoria. And they did a series of interviews with women teachers and leaders back in the 1980s. And this is what the women said. Few women in the teaching service could seek promotion because when, and this is a woman talking about herself, when I first started teaching, women who married had to resign and then they had to occupy the status of temporary for the rest of the time they taught. So the only women who were in the pool and eligible for promotion positions were single women. And I suppose people didn't regard them as the same as other people. They were something of an oddity. I mean, we're talking about the 1950s when 90 or 95% of women got married and very few at that time would have remained single. And then she goes on and says, there was a whole bunch of women who had to resign and come back as temporary. And she said these women would have been a real threat to the men, but they were eliminated earlier on because as soon as they married, they had to accept temporary status and that put them right out of the running. There are a lot of really capable women, excellent teachers, good administrators who fell by the wayside, and I think our education systems were the poorer for it. So things have changed. Let's fast forward. We're now in 2019 and things are different. Due to the hard-fought collective efforts from male and female educators and trade unions, we now have equal pay for women, and women do not resign when they marry. We have generous family leave entitlements that assist primary carers to balance family and work. But the disparities remain. Despite the fact that the majority of primary school teachers are female and increasing numbers of secondary teachers are female, the leadership of schools remains disproportionately male, and the figures are quite staggering. Studies of schools suggest that levels of sexual harassment continue amongst students and they are most commonly directed against young women teachers. The Me Too movement has not yet appeared to catch up with our schools. I guarantee it will. I think it will. So there's a job for our leadership. So I would like to welcome, without any further ado, our panel. I'm absolutely delighted that we've got them on board. They're going to talk about women leaders' roles in education. They're here to provide their wisdom, their expertise, their support and their understanding. And so, without any further ado, if I can ask our panel members, Professor Mandy Berry, Maria Cavuni from Auburn High School, who is the principal at Auburn High School, and also Fran Redden, who's the principal of Mentone Girls Grammar. Thank you. So we have a roving mic here. And first of all, I'm going to ask each woman just to stand up and if you could just briefly introduce yourselves, please.
Hi everyone. It's easier to see me, I think, when I'm standing up, except for the video up there. So, as Jane introduced me, my name's Mandy Berry. I'm a Professor of STEM Education here in the Faculty of Education and also the Associate Dean Research. And I never imagined when I began my career as a science and biology teacher that I would end up in this position. But it's been an interesting journey as I've moved from being a classroom teacher for many years in a variety of different school settings into university environment as a PhD student and beginning education lecturer to developing a career through education, particularly in science education, taking a time to go overseas and spend some years at Leiden University in the Netherlands and coming back here again to Monash after some time at RMIT as well. So a kind of circular route from Monash back to Monash through education and also through different teacher and researcher roles.
Hi everyone, my name's Maria Carvuni. I'm the principal of Auburn High School and I started my career in 1986 with Jane. My first year was at Gladstone Park Secondary College, a government school. My whole career has been in the government system. And Gladstone Park when I started, and I started as a science, maths, chemistry, maths teacher too. So this is interesting because I think you've got a bit of maths too. So all three of us have got maths. Maybe we're women that were doing maths when it wasn't actually a gender thing, I remember. But so from my career as a classroom teacher, took on opportunities at my school, leadership opportunities, and had a bit of a break for my family. And after about 14, 15 years, went to distance education, which is quite an unusual schooling system, and I learned a lot in that sector. Was an assistant principal there for about 7 years, worked in the northern region for a whole year on school change and school reform, which really influenced my thinking about big picture thinking beyond a school level, and then went to a school, did a short stint as in the northern suburbs at Reservoir, then first inaugural principal at Charles La Trobe College, low socioeconomic school, and my sixth year now is at Auburn High School, which is in a very middle class area. So I've actually gone to different school sectors and different size sectors, which actually has really made my career very interesting. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name's Fran Redden. I'm the principal at Mentone Girls Grammar and I've been there for 14 years as principal, so I'm a survivor in leadership. But I started out very humbly teaching French, maths, logic and some EAL and fell into the independent sector. So unlike Maria, I just fell into there and have been there ever since. I've worked in very large multi-campus co-ed schools, then large single-sex girls' schools, and then started at Mentone, which was a quite small girls' school in a beautiful Bayside suburb by the beach, and that project was a real turnaround project for taking a school that was not tracking too well and building that up. So I've had lots of different types of experience of a leadership, from running a French department and a languages department, which is like running the United Nations. You get a lot of great experience there. Running a subsection of a large school and being like a mini principal, and then taking on that principal role outright. And along the way, I've been fortunate to have opportunities to lead boards and learn about governance and serve on boards related to education. So that's been a really steep learning curve too, but a very fascinating one. And I'm just delighted to be here with my colleagues to be of any help that I can be for you as aspiring women and potentially male leaders as well.
Thank you. It feels a bit weird sitting down here because I kind of seeing your heads just above, but can you all see us? On the screen, yeah, well that's true, that's true. Okay, so each of you have had a demanding career and a variety of other commitments. So can you tell us one reason that you have pursued additional leadership roles?
Because it was fun. I think you see that there's a job to do, and sometimes there's just this inner drive. You see that there's a job to do and you go, well, I feel compelled to have a go at that and do it. And if you're lucky, you've got people around you who encourage you. Sometimes they encourage you because they don't want to do the job, so that's an opportunity. But I think it's available. You feel a sense of connection with it. You can see you can make a difference, and most of the time it's fun.
I'd agree with you, Fran, and I think for me it was also, and maybe it's the thinking, the scientific thinking, I'd always look at things and think of, oh, this could be done better, this would be interesting. So whenever challenges came up, I actually was attracted to that, and I really enjoyed taking something on, and I think thinking through a process and working with people to try and resolve what it is or try and make it better. So I think that was the driving force. And I think further in my career, why I considered it, and sometimes I did and I waited, and I don't think it was always fun. It was sometimes really tough work leading others, but I think that I felt that once you're in that position, it's actually quite an honour to be able to lead others and work with others, and you actually understand that the position actually brings with it all this, I suppose, power that you need to, or influence I should say rather, that you need to ensure that you use correctly, and it's not about you, it's about improving the system or others.
Yes, I think for me it was definitely, if I'm thinking about particular examples, improving the system or others and being passionately committed to a cause that I felt that I was in the right place and time to be able to pick up. And I'm thinking in particular of an education leadership position for an international research group where I felt that if I could get onto that international stage, I would have the opportunity to be able to get the ears of people who I wanted to influence, and that would be able to open some doors for me that may not have otherwise been possible too. So it was how to sort of access others to be able to influence and also to be visible in those particular stages as well.
And it's a great opportunity for learning. I think, you know, if we come into education as teachers, we naturally like learning. So opportunities to lead is just another expression of that, learning and helping other people to learn and grow with you.
Great, thank you. So that we can get to know each of you a little better, I'm wondering if you could tell us one way exercising leadership has come easily to you and one way that it's challenged you. We don't have to go, you can. Anyone jump in, start off.
I think for me, coming easily is in terms of a relational leadership or a social leadership. So I naturally like bringing people together. I get enthusiastic about ideas, and it's fantastic to be able to drive people together towards a goal. And so that part of it, I think, is something that comes naturally or relatively easily for me. However, with that means the challenge is if you can't get everybody on board, or if there's a particular goal that you're trying to drive towards that you know some people are not going to be happy with, it's that how do you manage that feeling of knowing where you want to go and feeling like you want to have everybody with you, but knowing also there'll be tension within that about how you manage the expectations of others too.
I'd agree. I think I've been told, well, I have been told that is probably one of my strengths about creating teams and bringing people together, and I actually function in that environment really well. And I seek out always to create teams in every leadership position I've had. I also think that one of the things that I am able to do is probably explain things with clarity about why we're doing things, and in a very simple level. And I think that's very important, particularly if you're looking at change. And usually when you're leading something, you're looking at changing a practice or a process. So people need to understand why you're doing it. And sometimes we go into too much detail and people just need clarity and that communication. What I probably found a bit challenging was with leadership also comes positional authority, where you sometimes have to tell people about when they're not doing the right thing. And I struggled with that. I actually struggled having those hard conversations. How do I do it? I was avoiding it, not talking to the people directly, and I had to learn that. I think that's something I've learnt in the role. It's about how you do it, because it wasn't part of my nature to tell people that sort of thing.
For me, I think the bit that came naturally for me was I could see the bigger picture. It was either the bigger purpose or where we could go. There was this sense of I was like 6 steps ahead of everyone else and got naturally enthusiastic and passionate about it. And I've had people say to me, Fran, you smile too much. I couldn't help it because it was just that enthusiasm that most of the time used to rub off on people. Mm-hmm. But the thing that I found really hard, and I cringe now thinking about it because I made so many mistakes, is the relational aspect of leadership when you have the badge. Mm. And how that works. And I cringe at the mistakes that I made in working with people, in how my communication was perceived by them in the early days. I cringed at how naive I was at the beginning. And I remember in my first school I was given a mentor. And I thought I was pretty good. I had an honours degree. I was a top dip-ed student. You know, I could do maths and I could do languages, left brain, right brain. I thought I was pretty good, but still thought I was humble. And then the mentor, I remember having this discussion with my mentor, a fabulous woman, just kind of a year or two ahead of me. And she said, and when you make a mistake, and I distinctly to this day remember, what mistake? I don't make a mistake. I'm really good. Technically, I'm really good. I can conjugate all my verbs. Operation, technically, I'm really good. What mistakes can I make? Oh boy, famous last words. In the classroom, so many mistakes. In talking to people and how I came across in respecting people, appearing to respect people, so many mistakes, and have really got the scars, but good learning, because out of all that really good learning occurs, which makes you more empathic, I suppose, to other people, and the privilege and the responsibility that you have when you lead, because it's not just about you. I think when you start, it is about you, because you get the badge and you're the princess or the queen or whatever it is. And you're elated until the reality hits and you reckon, oh, this is actually not about me, so I better get some self-awareness. And that was the real learning for me, I think.
I think sometimes it's your perceptions of what comes easily to you and other people's perceptions of what that is like when they experience it, not always in alignment. And perhaps that's one of the things that you learn early on compared with, having the authority and using the authority and people's experiences of your authority too.
Yeah, I think perceptions is a really key piece, and people see what they perceive you're good at. I've had people say, Fran, you get up on stage, you're such a great public speaker. And I never thought of myself as that. I just do it of necessity, I have to do it. And I said, oh, you're so good, mainly because I think people are scared of that. That's one of the development skills that they always put down for leadership. So people see things differently and we feel things differently. I used to think that the job of leadership was about managing emotions, other people's and your own, particularly when you're in a school with all the stakeholders and the kids and the parents and staff. But now I see that the job is really about managing fear, managing your own fear and managing other people's fear, because that's a real key driver to their behaviour. So I think I've really acquired a little bit of wisdom with that.
I think that's a really astute comment, and thinking back, the comment about the role of mentors and people who are able to honestly hold up a mirror to you, and for you to be able to learn from that too, because that's the thing. It's, there can be people who say that to you and you don't want to take it. You want to hear what they have to say, but you took it and you learned. And I think it's amazing that you get criticised as a leader for smiling too much, but there you go. I'm wondering if each of you could just reflect on how you think your area of work has changed over the last 5-10 years in terms of gender equality, and what do you predict will happen in regard to gender equality in the next decade?
I'm happy to lead with that one. I've seen a lot more females putting their hands up, a lot more females speaking about, hey, I'm interested in doing this, what do I do? I don't think that was happening when we started, or 33 years ago. And in actual fact, I can give you a little story about when I started doing some postgrad studies in the mid-90s, And my background's Greek, so I was at a family function, and the comment was, "Why are you doing this course? Do you want to be a principal?" And I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm too embarrassed to say yes. And I think I said, oh, no, I thought it'd be a good course. I was actually encouraged by my principal to do it. But just that perception that, you know, then to say that I want to do it, oh, well, this woman's highly ambitious, you know, it's just like, whereas if it's a male doing it, it wouldn't be such a big deal. But I think what I'm seeing is that young females now are coming or saying, and I suppose through my own experience, and through what you were describing, what was happening in the government system is I probably do have a bias to, you know, encouraging other women to go for positions. So I run a leadership program in my school, which is a little bit more formal, and I just find that they're not as shy. They're happy to come and speak to you and get advice, and I've seen that as a big change. I'm also seeing a lot more females being appointed in positions of leadership in schools. In secondary in particular, believe it or not, but in primary where there's a big imbalance of males and females, there's still that work there. And I think it probably has to do with women having to take time off for family and so on, and, you know, just staying in the career path for longer. And I'm in town, in a central office for the department, I'm not sure that the gender balance is right there either, the glass ceiling. But that's probably my perception, being in government schools for that long, that it's definitely... And we use a merit-based system, which is very fair, which is good.
I think I've been lucky in the faculties of education that I've worked in. There's always been strong female role models for me to see and talk with and learn from. And I think in education particularly, there's in faculties of education you tend to have more women. And in terms of our professoriate at the moment in the faculty, I think we're quite well, you know, balanced in terms of females and males. Of course, it hasn't always been that way, but I've seen that change. And one of the areas I think where change needs to come is the more senior levels of the university. So at the moment, I think we have in Australia much less than half of the vice-chancellors are female. So that's the next kind of ceiling, I suppose, that we need to start to penetrate. But again, there's great role models in those areas for us to think about. I also, when I think about the much younger women, I do see themselves putting themselves forward, being more confident. And sometimes I worry about my contemporaries in between those age groups that don't put themselves forward, that I see as having fantastic leadership potential, but say, well, I'm just one, or I'm just part of a team, and I'm trying to encourage them to go for different sorts of positions, and they tend to take a back step on that. So I'm looking for ways to be able to empower them to see that they're not only capable, but they're probably going to be really terrific in those positions if they put themselves forward. So that's sort of that middle group, I think, that I'm trying to work with to see themselves as future leaders too.
Well, I've seen fantastic female role models in schools. At the industry level, in the independent sector, when I go to the principals' meetings, there are certainly more suits there than there are skirts in that sense. So it's still, I think, a bit of an imbalance. But what I've observed and what I've noticed in the stats that have been out lately is that, yes, we are in unprecedented times for women. Certainly with the girls that I have at my school, I see that they are more open, more willing, more assertive, and I think in society we've seen, you know, not just the Me Too movement, but, you know, women's AFL, and you're seeing much more of a societal movement. But what I have noticed is that women tend to make great 2ICs. And that's where they stay. They don't take that next step of going from vice principal, for example, to principal as readily as perhaps males do. And I'm curious as to why that is. I wonder whether it's something about the comfort zone. I wonder whether it's about perfectionism. I wonder if it's about worrying that they don't have all the skill set. I'm curious about why that is and how we might be able to help them take that step and learn through that step. There is a lot of scrutiny when you take the top job, and you have to learn in front of everyone else. And you're the obvious target for criticism just because you have that title. So perhaps helping women with a bit of resilience and really exploring and understanding what is the payoff for them in not taking that next step up. And a lot of my work now is to help women consider taking leadership, practicing taking leadership roles, starting small, practicing with that, practicing letting yourself be seen and what that feels like, and to sit with that sort of fear. So trying to grow people like that and say, it's okay, everybody feels scared. That's the good news. Everybody feels scared about that. And to give them the confidence that they have the capability, can grow their capability, and can do fantastic work in that role, and that role is worth doing. That role is worth doing. It's very fulfilling and rewarding and can be fun.
It's interesting because even though we say it a lot about women tend to want to know how exactly to do the job before they even apply for the job, you see it played out over and over again. And I'm curious too about, what are the kinds of strategies that we can employ to help people feel confident to take the step, knowing that when you start, you're not expected to know everything in that role as well, and that you don't have to be perfect, and to build some sense of resilience around what it's like to be seen. Because I think, that is a fear shared by a lot of people about what it means to be publicly visible in the role.
I think demystifying that process, just you talking about it as you are now, and I'm more thinking about the principal preparation program at Bastow, where people actually have an opportunity to take on board an internship with a principal and shadow them for about 3 weeks up to 6 weeks, and I think that can also be very helpful. I know for me, I ended up as a deputy principal of a large secondary school, and the reason I went for that was because I watched a lot of, as a curriculum consultant, I went to lots of principal network meetings and I visited lots of schools, and I realised they could do this job. Actually, I could do this job, and it was part of it was around demystifying the role and really seeing that it was a perfectly manageable job to do. But at the time, I didn't feel that. It was only when I had those opportunities.
Maybe also you figured out that the deputy principal might have had more power.
There's another story there. I won't tell you about it tonight, but maybe over a coffee. So I'm really curious to know some of your personal experiences in your journey to senior leadership. What were some of the successes? What were some of the obstacles? And what role did your gender play in either the successes or the obstacles?
I didn't expect my gender to be an issue. And I guess as I was going through my early teaching career, I did take opportunities, and I had some good mentors, and I had to learn about communication and how to be heard. But I was interested in that because I was a language teacher, so that's part of the learning. So when I got to be a principal, and I went to a conference, and it's one of those ones where you go to a conference just a day, and then at the dinner, your partner can come with you. So my husband came along to the dinner part, and we were standing there, and another male principal came up to both of us, looked at my husband and said, "So what school are you principal of?" And he went, "Actually, it's my wife who's the principal." And then there was a really awkward moment. And it was at that point where I thought, why don't I look like a principal? I've got a little bit of gravitas work to do, or maybe I've got to lower my voice or something. And it just really took me, it sort of took me by surprise. And as I worked with young women in education and in other fields, in law, in construction, I started to hear these stories of, we can't get cut through. It's interesting now, I'm part of a CEO group to make sure that we have, learning from outside our own industry and how we can contribute. Out of 15 people in that group, we have breakfast meetings once a month or so. I am the only female. And I keep challenging them. It's a bit of a joke now with the guys. And I said, okay, so where's the other member who's coming on board? There's still work to do out there. And what I think is really important is not to fall, I think, into the trap that there's something wrong with you. So I was there at that dinner with my husband and I thought, what's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with women. It's not a deficit model. It's just that we need to get a little bit more balance in the world. And there's just so much unconscious bias. We don't realise that it's there. And I think that's part of it. We can keep chipping away at that and not coming from a victim space. Then we've got a chance of building that momentum that's currently at this point in history for women, at least in the Western world, and being able to not have that expectation. There's a fantastic video on YouTube. You can look it up, a bit of an experiment that was done with 7-year-olds. It's a co-ed class, and they asked the kids to draw a fireman, it was a fireman, a surgeon and a fighter pilot. Draw them. And this huge percentage of kids drew males. So right from young, 7 years old, we already have, nobody's fault, we already have that image that those professions are male. I'll put that to my parent community at the beginning of the year last year. I said, did you think of a female or a male when I mentioned those? And showed them the clip, and it was kind of like, oh, light bulb. So slowly and more quickly, I think now, there's a little bit of work to do when we politely, lightly point those things out to people.
I'm trying to remember the question.
Okay. Yeah.
Successes early in the career?
Some of the personal experiences you've had in your journey to senior leadership, successes and obstacles, and what role, if any, did your gender play in this?
I think the successes, when I think back, was, and I think you were saying that earlier, Fran, is about starting small and putting your hand up. And if you want to do something, you should do it. And I think when I look at what was successful in my career was having people that I could work with and being able to go work in a team. I think that's very important. And I think, and I know I'm gender stereotyping here, but females tend to like to work with others and discuss things, and that actually is a really strong quality. And in terms of mentors and advocates, one thing when I reflect on what was successful was that in the programs where I did go to others and there was someone working with me to guide me through those difficult decisions, how does this look and so on, they were much more successful programs. Whereas when I've tried to do it on my own, and I think back at my early career, my first leadership position, and I cringe as well. And I think, how could I, do that or, say things like that? Because you're learning on the job. And you always learn on the job, by the way. There is no manual. You actually can read and do courses, but you will learn on the job. It's the best experience. But it's about being reflective and talking to others and really honestly listening to what they're telling you, people you trust, and put those people around you. And even now at my school, because, as a principal, there's all these layers between me and the teachers at the coalface. So every now and then I'll go in the staff room and I might say things like, hey, how's this going? Tell me about this. We're thinking about doing that. Just random conversations, and at least it gives me a bit of a litmus test about what's happening rather than just hearing from my leadership team who often we might be thinking along the same lines. We've had all that. So I think you need to go out and check in with other people while you're doing that. And I think the more we do that as leaders, and again I think that, and I am generalising, but females tend to like doing that and asking others, whereas I've noticed my first assistant principal job was a male principal and two male assistant principals, and I don't feel, and yes, I was the least experienced, but I also felt like they were telling me what I needed to do rather than respecting why I was there for that position. And I also picked up from working with males how much more confident they were about things that, like, I'd double check and triple check anything before I presented it. They'd just go and say, this is what it is, and so on. I think, that doesn't sound right. But they were going there and saying it with all this confidence. I'm saying, hey, Maria, you've got to learn from that, because sometimes you've got to go. And there were some of the skills, and it was just this real confidence that that's actually not a bad thing. Also, I worried more than them. They wouldn't worry when things went wrong. And I think, hey, that's actually not a bad quality. And I know I'm generalising, but I thought, that's good. I've got to learn. And the delegation, Miss Non-Delegation, I learned, I'm stupid. Why am I doing all this work? These guys are asking. So I learned to delegate because, you know, you often can't do it all. So again, I know I'm talking about, but my experience there was very much, I'd sit back initially and listen. And that's very much, you know, a gender thing, I think. And I've learnt to still listen to people. I think that's very important, but also to have that extra confidence, because that is important. And that's why they don't care if they don't tick every single selection criterion, because they've got the confidence to do it. And we've got to talk to ourselves and talk ourselves up. That, you know, you could sit there, and I can tell you now, most of my leadership positions, I wouldn't be here now if it wasn't for people who came to me and said, Maria, you should go for that job. You'd be great in that job. Just that simple sentence made such a difference and gave me the confidence. I don't think I've ever would have said, oh, I should do that and whatever. I never thought I was ready. But when people come and tell you, and we need to do it to others, so we need to find people that we think, geez, they're great, and be really clear to them about the way you did this or the way you did that. You know, when they're doing those little tasks, you know, that shows this and that. That's what builds the confidence. And if we're aware that that's something that's held us back, and I'm aware that's something that I would have waited till another 20 years before I was ready, but having those people, that's a really powerful thing. So I think in terms of successes, it's been working with others, and in terms of obstacles, I think fairly early in my career I had someone who was my superior at that time, I suppose, who actively worked against me to not promote me because he wanted to keep me in my faculty and was blocking. And
that's a progress marker.
Yeah.
That's a leadership progress marker. If you find that means that you...
So there's probably been 2 people in my whole career. I've been very lucky having a lot of advocates and mentors, males and females, informal, never really formal, some amazing people who've just given me that confidence. But in terms of blockers, there's probably been a couple of blockers who just... I didn't want you to move ahead because of your either age or your gender.
Now, before Mandy speaks, just to say, I really want to give us time for questions and answers from the audience. So while Mandy's speaking, I'm going to ask both Maria and Fran, and also Mandy, because I know you're a woman and you can multitask. Sorry, stereotyping madly here. If just one bit of advice you'd give women who are just starting out in education, or who are a few years into their careers, who want to eventually move into a leadership role in education, or might be just thinking about it, what's one bit of advice you'd give them? So hold on to that thought. Mandy.
Okay, so I was very fortunate when I began my career in academia, and actually when I was working in schools as well, to be brought into teams, and teams of people who actually cared about not only getting the job done but progressing to the next level. So there was always people who were making explicit what was going on, because there's a lot of secret business around what's happening in power structures within organisations, and also about how to make progress. And so if we're working together on a project, we would be talking about how we manage the project at the same time that we were actually engaging in the work of the project, which I think was really helpful for me. And I've also been fortunate to have very active sponsors, and I call them sponsors more than mentors, who have offered their networks, who have introduced me to people who have been actively trying to promote me and my work in different forums. And of course, then it's up to me to be able to take up opportunities and to then, network with those people and do my work with them. But sometimes you need people who can open those doors for you. Sometimes they get blocked, clearly. really. But I think that's an important message that we need to give each other, and also the people that we work with who may be in positions who can open doors, because you just don't know how important that is in terms of being able to be visible and to start to be able to profile yourself and your work. And I had the same experience of also being tapped on the shoulder to do a particular job and then wondering, wow, really, am I capable of doing this thing? And then looking around and thinking, hang on, if that person is capable of doing this job, then surely I am as well. And reassuring yourself for all those little nagging voices in your head about, really, what are you doing here, you imposter? So I think that's something that we never really get rid of, but that we learn to manage over time as well. And having those around you who you can talk about that with. I have close colleagues who I can share some of those experiences who are in senior leadership positions, and I think, oh, okay, they find that thing strange or scary or difficult. You know, it's not as if I'm supposed to be able to know how to do all of these jobs well at the same time. So the successes have very much been about sponsorship, about teamwork, about looking out for each other and making explicit some of that secret business. And yeah, obstacles, well, I've been hung out to dry a couple of times, but I learnt from that. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so the challenge is one bit of advice in under a minute. Who wants to begin?
Oh, you go. Yeah, I'd say recognise your own worth. I mean, there are times when people think about themselves as not sufficient or not adequate, but I think there's always a place that you can draw power from in yourself. So having a belief in yourself and a confidence to be able to accept that opportunity, to be able to persist, to realise your own personal power when power around seems to be closing in on you. I think that's an important message for me. So persistence and recognising your own personal worth.
Seek out opportunities. Look out for things that you really want to do and just go ahead and do them. And talk to someone. Talk to someone who's going to help you get there. Don't sit there and do it on your own. The more you tell people, this is what I'm thinking about, the more they'll think about you when an opportunity comes up.
I think you have to take responsibility. If you just wait for opportunities to come to you, I think you'll be waiting a long time. So you have to take responsibility, and you need to feel the fear and do it anyway. Because when you're learning and growing, you'll always be afraid at some level. Always. So feel the fear, do it anyway, practice starting small, but take responsibility and go and seek it, ask for help. Don't go back and work from the basement as a victim. Work from the balcony and feel the fear.
Fantastic. Thank you. How about, before the Q&A, a round of applause for our wonderful panel. So many take-home messages, but now it's your opportunity for questions. And we have a wonderful person zipping around with the mic. Thank you, Megan.
Hi ladies, I'm a primary school principal and currently working at Basto actually. My question is to Maria. Coming into secondary principalship as a female in a society where people would like to enrol their children in a strongly male environment, how have you coped with that?
I think my style is quite different to the male, so I think I've coped quite well. I find that by explaining what we do, I do a lot of the why, I think, in my role. And I did a tour today with about 30 people in my school. And the first thing I talk about is why, what the vision of the school is and why we do things. And I think that's been a positive, because I think when you explain to parents not just about your data and your sporting achievements, but why you run programs and how you teach, I go into the doing stuff. I think parents really engage with that and they understand, and that helps them make the choice for the school. And if all they want is just the results, I'm not sure we're the right school for them. So I think it's about, you have to be as a leader who you are. I don't have to worry about being a male or female, and I actually have more boys than girls in my school. So I feel that that's made no difference, and I think it's the confidence I've now got. If it was my first principalship, I'll be honest with you, it'd be probably a bit tougher, but I think I've got the confidence to say this is why we do it, and to just believe in yourself and believe in why you're doing it.
Terrific, thank you. Another question?
Hi, I'm doing my Master of Teaching with Monash, and I've been working in a school for some time. Personally, I have noticed while I'm working, I make a lot of compromises in terms of personal family life. And I wanted to understand from any one of you, when it happens, how do you actually deal with it?
It's a tough question, and I noticed from my own personal experience when I was going away to conferences and people would come around with pre-cooked meals for my husband and my son, and when they went away, nobody did the same thing for me. So it was a really interesting, eye-opening thing about whose perception about who gets supported. But yeah, it's really difficult about how you organise time and how you manage the various commitments, and also for me around the guilt, which I think is sometimes self-imposed around what I should be doing compared to maybe what I could be doing, which is spending quality time for a certain amount of time, with family, compared to thinking that I have to spend more time with them than maybe I need to. But it is around trying to structure your time so that you do have the opportunity to do what you want to do, but also feel guilt-free when you're doing other things too.
I think that it would be a lie to say that stopping to have family doesn't sort of slow down your career. And definitely my career would have been paced faster, but they're decisions you make. And I think the advice I give to young females who think about it is that your career's there. I always feel that family and those sort of decisions are very important, and good people always get jobs. It doesn't matter if you slow it down for a bit, you'll come back, you've got great skills. That shouldn't stop you from doing what you're doing. But I do know that, I have to share this story, when I was expecting my first child, my principal called me into his office and was asking me to apply for this promotional position, and I said to him, I'm pregnant. And he said, oh, shit. I said, oh, I'm sorry, congratulations. So I think that, as much as we say as women and, this superwoman, I hate all that stuff, you work extra hard, you still have to do all this and that, but you get through it, you have to get through it, as long as you're enjoying what you're doing. But your career definitely slows down. There's no way, you have to take a break, but it's still something that you can still end up doing well as long as you're good at what you're doing, I think.
I think, we're always going to have things that life throws us. And I think trying to maintain a position of choice in what you do so that when you are engaged in your work or your family or sleep or whatever it is, you do it 100%. You do it 100%. So all those techniques now that have gained some traction around mindfulness and awareness, I think they actually help. They're a very small investment for a big dividend. Everybody has the same amount of time. We've all got 24 hours. And I think you do get better at delegating, being more efficient, and making choices about what's really important. And you do get better at that, and that does help. If you're passionate about anything, there's going to be peak periods, and you're up till midnight or you're up at 4:30 because you're passionate about it and you cope with it. But that self-care of making sure that you have the enough sleep, enough nutrition, not too much alcohol to be able to function is important, because you've got a bigger goal. And as long as you can see that bigger picture and that bigger purpose, I think that's what will get you up every morning to go, yep, I can do this. I have to remind myself every morning, but I can do it because it's worth it. And I don't think there's anything more important than education. Education, we're lucky. Education is worth it. Education makes a difference. So that's worth getting up in the morning for.
Wow, okay, so, yeah. Sorry, got someone over here and then here and then here.
Okay. Thanks, Jane. We've actually got a couple of questions from the live streamers tonight. So our first question is from Frill. What do you usually do when you encounter gender bias in the workplace?
Fantastic question. I'm conscious of the time. We've got about 5 minutes left, and we've got 2 other people here. So I'm just going to ask maybe one of you to have a go at that. I say that reluctantly because it's a great question.
But it's not a short answer.
No, that's
it's a little
okay.
story.
Go for it.
Because this is one that is still, and this only happened 8 years ago, where I was principal at a P-12 school, and I'd appointed a very young leading teacher who had to go and work in the primary sector with some very experienced, predominantly women. And she was implementing quite a bit of change. And one of them pulled her aside, and she was quite a powerful person, and said, "Listen here, dearie, I've been teaching longer than you've been alive, so don't you tell me what to do." So my poor little leading teacher came in and just said, "Maria, I nearly cried, I didn't know." So what did you say? She said, "Nothing." I said, "Great." So what I said to her is, right, firstly, I can go there and just say to her, you know, tell her off, you're the leading teacher, this is why we're doing it. But I reckon you've got to go back and you've got to talk to her about why you're doing it. Again, it's the why with me and why it's part of our role. And then you finish off by saying, do you have an issue with my age? And because I'm a female, because it was generally, it was exactly that. And she did that. She said she was so nervous and she had to stop and think, this teacher, and said, yeah, maybe I do. I think you've just got to confront it. You've just got to say it what it is there and then and say, this is, do you have an issue with my age? Do you have an issue with who I am? Because particularly, and actually this is something I've noticed because I have appointed a lot of young females in leadership positions, often, and that has caused a bit of an issue in some of my schools, and particularly in this school, because I've had a lot of young staff where there's been a bit of that issue because they're young and they're female and they've been promoted too quickly.
Right, fantastic. Yes.
Oh, thank you. If somebody could speak to the concerns that some of us might have being overqualified or having bigger qualifications than, say, a principal in a school or other staff members have in a school, and how you're received. I achieved a PhD a couple of years ago, and I've had some troubles getting a job in a government school, a little bit of kickback, and even being in a private school last year. I was actually applied to go into a leadership role and couldn't work out why I wasn't appointed to that. So if somebody could, I don't know if they could tackle that question, if you're overqualified or you seem to be more qualified than other teachers or leaders in the school.
I think we've got to be careful to assume that your qualification is the barrier to start with, because when I do recruitment for our school, we do look at the qualification. We actually, being teachers, I think we value qualifications. You go, wow, PhD, it's the pinnacle, you know, fantastic. But at the end of the day, it's about the right fit. And I think it's a trust factor. And what you have to be able to show is your credibility, and your qualifications get you part of that, your reliability, your authenticity, and then it's not all about you. And if you can have that equation, then that helps. I wouldn't go in worrying that your PhD is the issue. I would try and be communicating what it is that you bring for that purpose. Because you have to think, who do I serve? Whose life am I going to make easier by being in this organisation? It's so contextual. Don't ever make excuses for the learning and the achievements that you have. Right? And I say to parents, I have fantastic teachers, highly qualified. Some of them have PhDs, but if they're not interested in young people, and if they cannot relate to young people, I'm not interested. So it's demonstrating what you bring to that role, and your PhD is a value add.
Okay, one quick question. I think there was someone over here. Last person.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm currently a PhD student here with the Faculty of Education with 177 more days to go. I would like to be a pracademic. What I mean by that is I love the research and, you know, what we do here at Monash. But at the same token, I've also always been a classroom teacher as well. And as I'm approaching to the end of my torturous journey, I was wondering, you know, because I can see, you know, Professor Barish, you're in academia and then you're office principal. I just wanted to be able to use my skill as a researcher and adapt it to the real world and do action research and still help in the school. So what advice could you give that, or should I speak to you personally about it?
Might be a career advice.
Can I just say, in the government sector, unless you're applying for a position which involves, and it may be a leadership position where they're looking at someone who's overseeing STEM or someone who's overseeing an area where they're looking for time allowance for research to be part of that. But if you're applying for a straight teaching position, they'll be looking for your secondary, they'll be looking for your subjects and whether you're the right fit. It's exactly what you said. You're the right fit for that school, and that's the sort of expertise and knowledge and what you're bringing to that. But if you're more interested in doing research, you should be looking for positions where, and there's quite a bit at the moment now, they're looking at literacy and numeracy, and there's time allowances involved, and they'd be looking at using evidence-based research to improve certain practices, and there's positions that are going out in the moment. And in the department, there's new roles at Year 10 for literacy and numeracy people, particularly if you've got that expertise. So it'd be well worth applying for those roles.
Yeah, I think there's a variety of choices that you can make in your position, so it's quite an exciting situation to be in a way. I was a pracademic for a number of years because I found it incredibly fulfilling to be able to come here, think about what was going on in terms of theories and ideas, go into the classroom, test them out, be able to have the luxury of coming back. I also did a lot of classroom research myself, so as a classroom teacher I was doing research, but at some point I had advice, and I believe that was good advice, that I needed to make a decision about a career pathway because it's really difficult for me to be part-time in a school and part-time at university to be able to take up the opportunities of either one of those places. And so in the end, I chose academia, and I still get to teach and I still get to do research in my classrooms. And so that aspect hasn't changed, it's just with a different group of people. So know that I think you have multiple options that are all quite exciting. It just depends on, you know, where your interest lies, and also there's opportunities to change throughout your career as well.
And I'm going to stop it there because I'm very conscious of the time, but also I think hopefully these wonderful women are available, and if people want to come up and chat to them afterwards, which I'm sure they will, that they'll be available to talk with you. So I want to finish with a quote. Anne Jones, my friend, is in her 80s. She's in hospital at the moment, but we had a wonderful conversation last week about me doing this. She fought her way back into the teaching service, and she went on to have a long career as an outstanding teacher. I think her story reflects that of women educators in previous generations. But I'd like to end by saying the fight is not over. It is up to each of us to take it on board, do what we can to build change, encourage other women, as we've just seen exemplified tonight. It's our challenge, and that's why International Women's Day matters, because it gives us time to reflect, to come together as a collective of women and men, and to keep fighting for what is right and just. So if you could all put your hands together again for Maria Cavuni, Fran and Mandy.
So on behalf of everybody here, I'd also like to thank you, Jane, for managing the whole process. It was really enlightening, and so thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank you all for attending. This is the first of many events that the faculty will have across the year. So there's the Monash EDU education community. Please keep in touch. We've got many exciting things happening. One personally dear to my heart, which is the launch of Education Futures, so I just plugged that one, but there's many events, and they're all usually free. So this is actually about us engaging the community on the journey with us. So you're a fundamentally important part of the process. So I'd like to thank you for coming this evening, and thank you once again to our panel, and safe journey home.
You're terrific.